I met Olivia 8 years ago, and from the moment I saw her, I was hooked. She was radiant, full of energy, and had this ability to make everything feel alive. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was stunning. It was the way she carried herself, the way she could turn the most mundane moments into something exciting. She made me feel like life itself was an adventure. We met in Chicago, introduced through mutual friends at a rooftop bar downtown. I remember how she laughed at something I said, not just a polite chuckle, but a real, genuine laugh, like she was actually enjoying herself. That laugh became my favorite sound. I knew that night that I wanted to be with her. And for years, after 2 years of dating, we got married. It was the happiest day of my life. We were young, in love, and had the whole world ahead of us. The first 5 years were amazing. We traveled, tried new restaurants, had inside jokes that no one else understood. I worked long hours, but I never minded because I was doing it for us. Olivia enjoyed the comfortable life I provided, and that made me happy. But then somewhere along the way, things changed. It wasn't sudden. If it had been, maybe I would have noticed sooner. Maybe I would have asked the right questions before things got so bad. But it crept in like a slow poison, so gradual that I didn't see it happening until it was too late. At first, it was little things. She started going out more, coming home later than usual. She'd always been social, but now it felt excessive. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find her side of the bed empty. Some nights, she'd roll in at 2, 3 in the morning, barely acknowledging me before slipping under the covers. Then came the spending. Olivia had always liked nice things, but now it was different. The charges on our account piled up. Expensive dinners, designer clothes, hotel stays. I'd check the statements and see transactions at places we'd never been to together. Uber rides at ridiculous hours. I brought it up one evening, tried to sound casual. "Hey Liv, I noticed some big charges this month. Did you book a hotel for a trip or something?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that? Just a spa weekend with the girls." Another time, "Babe, did you really spend $700 at that boutique downtown?" She sighed. "Retail therapy, Ethan. God, don't be so dramatic." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. At first. But the doubts kept creeping in, little whispers in the back of my mind. Why did she need retail therapy when nothing in her life was stressful? And why was she so defensive every time I asked a simple question? Then one night, the doubt became something else. It was a Friday. I got home from work a little earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in when someone hasn't been home all day. Olivia wasn't there. That wasn't unusual anymore, so I didn't think much of it at first. I heated up some leftovers, turned on the TV, and waited. And waited. By the time the clock hit midnight, I wasn't just irritated, I was worried. I texted her, "Hey, where are you?" No response. I called, straight to voicemail. I told myself she was probably out with friends, that she'd come home soon. But my gut told me something else. Then, finally, at 2 a.m., the front door creaked open. Olivia stepped inside, giggling softly as she held her phone to her ear. She didn't see me at first. She kicked off her heels, setting her purse down with a careless thud. The smell of alcohol hit me immediately, sweet, strong, and mixed with a perfume I didn't recognize. She turned, her smile fading the second she saw me sitting on the couch. "Oh," she said like she'd forgotten I existed. I just watched her, waiting. She sighed dramatically. "What?" I stood up. "Olivia, we need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "About what, Ethan?" I took a breath. "You know what." She crossed her arms. Defensive already. "Oh, here we go again." But this time, I wasn't letting her brush me off. "You're never home," I said, keeping my voice even. "You're out all the time, spending money like we have an unlimited supply. And when you were here, you barely even talked to me. What the hell is going on?" Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored. "Nothing's going on," she said with a shrug. "I'm just enjoying my life." "Since when is that a crime?" I scoffed. "Enjoying your life? Do you even remember that you're married? Because it sure doesn't feel like it anymore." She let out a sharp laugh and shook her head. "You're so dramatic." "This isn't drama, Olivia. This is real. You're acting like you don't even care about this marriage." And that's when she said it. I'm not afraid to replace you. The words were like a punch to the gut. For a moment, the apartment went silent. I just stared at her, my heart hammering, my breath coming slower. But my face? My face stayed completely neutral. What did you just say? She met my gaze without flinching. You heard me. A cold chill ran down my spine. What the hell did she mean by that? Replace me? For the first time I knew. She wasn't just acting different. She was different. We argued after that. I don't even remember all the words we threw at each other. She called me controlling, said I was suffocating her. I told her she was selfish, that she didn't even try to be in this marriage anymore. At some point, she grabbed her purse, stormed to the door, and slammed it behind her. But this time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt focused. Her words kept replaying in my head. I'm not afraid to replace you. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. After Olivia left that night, I sat in the dimly lit apartment, staring at the door for what felt like hours. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every expression. Asterisk, I'm not afraid to replace you. Asterisk, the way she said it, calm, confident, without a hint of hesitation, sent a chill down my spine. That wasn't something you said in the heat of an argument. That was something you said when you meant it. I knew then that she was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I started paying closer attention. At first, I kept it subtle. I watched her more carefully, noting her behavior, her reactions. I listened when she spoke, not just to the words, but to what wasn't being said. I started checking our bank statements more frequently, scrolling through the transactions late at night when she was asleep. The more I looked, the worse it got. There were dinners at expensive restaurants I had never been to, hotel charges in the city, late-night Uber rides to locations I didn't recognize. I confronted her once about the money. Liv, what's this charge at the Langham? Did you stay at a hotel? She barely looked up from her phone. Yeah, it was a last-minute girls' trip. You were working late, so I figured, why not? Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. But I let it go for the moment. Then, one evening, I came home earlier than usual. I walked in, set my keys down, and was about to call out to Olivia when I heard her voice. Soft, flirty, and definitely not meant for me. I froze. She was on the phone. I know, baby, she was saying. I miss you too. Ugh, I hate sneaking around like this. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I stepped forward, just as my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden noise must have startled her, because she spun around so fast she nearly dropped her phone. The color drained from her face. Ethan, she said, breathless, her fingers fumbling as she quickly hung up. You still here? Who was that? She let out a nervous laugh. Oh, just Melissa. Melissa, the same friend she barely talked to anymore. I didn't believe her for a second, but I also didn't push it. Not yet. Instead, I watched her. She was different now. Jumpy. Paranoid. She checked her phone constantly, her fingers flying across the screen the second she thought I wasn't looking. That was it. That was the moment I knew Olivia was cheating on me. That night, I waited for her to fall asleep, then I took her phone. I wasn't the jealous type. Never had been. But after what I had just heard, I had to know. I went through her messages. Instagram. WhatsApp. Emails. Nothing. Not a single thing. Either she had deleted everything, or she was using another phone. I clenched my jaw. She was careful. Too careful. But if she thought she could hide this from me forever, she was wrong. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed help, so I called a private investigator. His name was Daniel, and I met him that afternoon at a quiet cafe across town. He was in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. The kind of guy who had seen it all and wasn't easily surprised. I told him everything. Olivia's late nights, the reckless spending, the secret phone call, the way she had erased all traces of anything suspicious. He listened carefully, jotting down notes. Then he leaned back and studied me. Sounds like she's definitely up to something, he said. I exhaled. Can you find out for sure? He smirked. That's what I do. I hired him on the spot. For the next few days, I went about my life as if nothing had changed. I kissed Olivia goodbye in the morning, asked her how her day was, even brought home her favorite takeout one evening. She smiled at me, acting like everything was normal. But I knew better, and soon I'd have proof. 3 days later, Daniel called me. "Ethan, we need to meet." His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, a finality. He had found something. I gripped my phone tighter. "All right. When and where?" "Come to my office. Now." The whole drive there, my stomach churned. I already knew what he was going to tell me. But knowing and seeing are two different things. Maybe some part of me still clung to the hope that I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. When I arrived, Daniel was already seated behind his desk, a manila folder resting in front of him. He didn't say much, just pushed it toward me. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the edge. Once I opened this, there would be no more "maybe she still loves me," no more "maybe it's all in my head." There would only be the truth. I flipped it open, and there she was, Olivia, the woman I had spent years building a life with, the woman I had promised forever to. With him. The man was tall, dark-haired, well-dressed, asterisk smug star, the kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. In one photo, he had his arm wrapped around Olivia at a dimly lit bar. In another, they were at a restaurant, her hand resting on his as she laughed. Then the worst one, Olivia standing outside his apartment, kissing him. I stared at the pictures, my body completely still. For a moment, I felt nothing, just a hollow kind of silence. Then, like a flood, the emotions hit me all at once. Anger, disgust, humiliation. I had suspected it. Deep down, I had known. But seeing it with my own eyes? That was something else entirely. Daniel cleared his throat. "His name is Ryan Walker. I tailed them for 3 days. It's not just a fling. She's practically living a double life." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to keep breathing. "I see that." Daniel gave me a knowing look. "What do you want to do?" I closed the folder and took a deep breath. "I'm going to handle this the right way." The next morning, I woke up before Olivia. She was still asleep, curled up under the blankets like nothing had happened. Like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, stealing my time. I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but disgust. Then, without a word, I got up, got dressed, and left the apartment. I drove straight to a lawyer's office. No hesitación. No second thoughts. The lawyer, a sharp-looking man in his 40s, listened intently as I laid out the details. I told him everything, how Olivia was never home, how she was draining our bank account, and, most importantly, how she had been involved with another man. He leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "You have proof." I pulled out the folder from my bag and placed it on the table. "Right here." He opened it, flipped through the photos, and let out a short breath. "Perfect. This will make things a lot easier for you." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. "I want the divorce to be fast and clean," I said. "No negotiations, no drawn-out fights. I want her to walk away with nothing." He smirked. "You came to the right guy." I signed the paperwork, shook his hand, and walked out feeling lighter. For the first time in months, I felt in control. That night, I acted like nothing had changed. When Olivia came home, I greeted her with a smile. I even asked how her day was. She barely responded, too busy texting. Probably him. Good. Let her feel comfortable. Let her think she got away with it. Over the next few days, I played the role of the clueless husband. I made her coffee in the morning, asked if she wanted to watch a movie together, even complimented her outfit. She ate it up. She had no idea that while she was sneaking around, I was preparing to throw her out of my life for good. 3 days later, the papers were ready. I picked them up from my lawyer and sat in my car, staring at the thick stack of documents. This was it, the final step. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Jake. "Hey," I said, "I need a favor." Jake and I met at a small cafe near his place. He had been my best friend for over a decade, someone I trusted like a brother. When I told him everything, he sat back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "Dumb, man." I nodded. "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he leaned forward. "What do you need me to do?" I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "I need you to serve Olivia with these." His brows lifted. "You want me to do it?" I want it to be a surprise. Jake let out a low whistle, flipping through the pages. Then he looked up at me, eyes sharp. You sure about this? I've never been more sure about anything. He nodded, setting the folder down. All right, I'll take care of it. The next evening, Olivia and I were sitting in the living room. She was scrolling through her phone, probably texting him. I was pretending to watch TV. Then there was a knock at the door. I got up, walked over, and opened it. Jake stood there, holding the folder. Without a word, he stepped inside and handed it to Olivia. Here you go, he said, giving her a quick nod before turning and walking out. Olivia blinked, confused. What is this? I didn't answer. I just sat back down and watched her open it. She flipped through the pages, her confusion slowly turning to horror. Her face went pale. Her hands started shaking. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Ethan, what the hell is this? I leaned back, my voice flat. You tell me. She swallowed hard, her lips parting, but no words came out. These are divorce papers, she finally whispered, her voice shaking. Yeah, I said simply. A beat of silence. Then her expression changed. Her shock turned to anger. What the hell is this? You're divorcing me? Why? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Asterisk, why asterisk? I echoed. I reached into the folder, pulled out the pictures Daniel had taken, and laid them on the table in front of her. One by one, each image more damning than the last. Her with Ryan at the bar. Her holding his hand at dinner. Her kissing him outside his apartment. She gasped, a sharp, strangled sound. Where did you get these? I looked her dead in the eye. I hired a private investigator. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then she exploded. You put someone to spy on me? That's disgusting, Ethan, she spat, her voice rising. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Oh, I'm the disgusting one? That's rich. She stood up, her knees weak, tears welling in her eyes. You're really doing this? I am. Her breath hitched. Ethan, please let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I interrupted. My voice was calm. Final. Now, she had no choice but to face the truth. And I had never felt more in control. Olivia sat there, frozen. Her hands hovered over the pictures like she didn't want to touch them, like they might burn her. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She just stared, her face shifting between panic, shock, and something else, something colder. Ethan, she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. This isn't. Don't. My voice was calm, steady, too steady. She swallowed hard. It's not what you think. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Then what is it, Olivia? Enlighten me. She hesitated, her mind scrambling for an explanation. I could see it. The wheels turning, the excuses forming, the desperate attempt to manipulate her way out of this. It was a mistake, she blurted. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely, Ethan. You've been so distant, and I held up a hand, cutting her off. Stop. Her mouth snapped shut. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table, my voice like ice. You don't get to put this on me. You made this choice. You did this. Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. But I love you, she whispered. I scoffed, shaking my head. Love? Love? You don't get to say that. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling, but I pulled away before she could touch me. Ethan, please. No, I pushed the folder closer to her. I already filed the papers. You going to sign them? She blinked, her breath hitching. No. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I won't sign them, she said, her voice gaining strength. I won't just let you throw everything away over one mistake. One mistake? I let out a humorless laugh. I grabbed the photos again, fanning them out in front of her. Which one, Olivia? The first time? The second? The third? How many times does it have to happen before it stops being a mistake and starts being a choice? Her face twisted in frustration. You put a spy on me? Damn right I did. I met her gaze, unflinching. And look at what he found. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You're being insane, Ethan. You're paranoid. I clenched my jaw. Paranoid? I grabbed my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. Go ahead. Read the messages. Her eyes flickered with hesitation. but she took the phone. Her face paled as she scrolled. Then her hand started shaking, and she dropped the phone like it was on fire. "That's not," she started, but I cut her off again. "You're out of lies, Olivia." She was silent for a long moment. Then she exhaled, long and slow, and leaned back in her chair. The sadness in her face faded, replaced by something more calculating. "You really want this?" she asked, tilting her head. "You really think you'll be better without me?" I folded my arms. "I know I will." She smirked bitterly. "Fine." I watched as she picked up the pen. She hovered over the paper for a moment. Then, with a sharp sigh, scribbled her name. It was done. She set the pen down and looked up at me. "Are you happy now?" I met her gaze, my face unreadable. "I will be." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You're so cold." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't cold, I was just done. She stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back. "I'll pack my things." I nodded. "Good." Without another word, she turned and walked toward our bedroom. I heard the closet doors open, the sound of clothes being yanked off hangers, the rustling of fabric being shoved into a suitcase. And I just stood there, letting it all sink in. It was over. A part of me had expected to feel broken, to feel empty, but all I felt was relief. She had made her choice, and I had finally made mine. I walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a drink. I took a long sip, the warmth spreading through me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. A few minutes later, Olivia reappeared, dragging a suitcase behind her. Her eyes were red, but her expression was blank. She stopped in the doorway, gripping the handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Ethan." Her voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. "Are you really just letting me go?" I met her gaze. "You let me go a long time ago." A tear slipped down her cheek, but I didn't react. She let out a shaky breath, nodded once, then turned and walked out the door. I waited until I heard the sound of her car pulling away before I let out a breath. Then I walked over, locked the door behind her, and finally, felt free. For the first time in years, I woke up to silence. No rustling in the bathroom. No sound of Olivia rummaging through the closet. No passive-aggressive sighs when I didn't immediately get up. Just peace. I lay there for a few moments, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle in. It was really over. The papers were signed. She was gone, and I felt free. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. I cleared out the house, removing every trace of her. I transferred the bills to my name alone, canceled the joint credit card she had drained, and even repainted the bedroom. It was therapeutic, like I was erasing her one step at a time. I hit the gym more, went out with friends. I even booked a trip, a solo getaway, something I never would have done while married. And damn, it felt good. I expected to feel lonely, but I didn't. I felt lighter. Olivia, on the other hand, was a different story. At first, she kept her distance, probably too caught up with him, Chris to care. But then, the messages started. At first, they were small. "Hey, can we talk?" "Ethan, I just need a minute." I ignored them. Then the calls came. I let them ring. Then, one night, I came home late from the gym to find her sitting on my doorstep. She looked awful. Her hair was a mess, her expensive coat wrinkled like she had slept in it. She had dark circles under her eyes, and when she looked up at me, her face was filled with something I never thought I'd see from her. "Regret." "Ethan," she whispered. I sighed, already exhausted. "What are you doing here, Olivia?" She bit her lip, her eyes welling up with tears. "I made a mistake." I scoffed, stepping past her to unlock the door. "Yeah, I know." "Please," she said quickly, standing up. "Can we just talk?" I turned to face her. "About what, exactly?" "How you threw away our marriage for some loser. How you laughed in my face when I called you out. How you told me you weren't afraid to replace me." She flinched at that last part. "I didn't mean that." I leaned against the door frame, crossing my arms. "Yeah? Well, you sure as hell acted like you did." Her lip trembled. He wasn't who I thought he was. She swallowed hard. "He was using me, Ethan. He never cared about me." I let out a low whistle. "Shocking." She winced. I lost everything. The apartment, the money, I don't know where else to go. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Huh, maybe you should have thought of that before you screwed me over. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. She reached out, but I stepped back. No, Olivia. My voice was firm. You don't get to do this. You made your choice, remember? She sniffled. I was wrong. I shook my head. You don't get to regret it now. You don't get to waltz back in and expect things to be fine. But I love you, she whispered desperately. I laughed. Actually laughed. No, Olivia. You love the life I gave you. You love the comfort, the security. But me? You threw me away the second you got bored. She wiped at her face, her hands shaking. I was stupid, Ethan. I thought the grass was greener. I exhaled sharply. And now? She swallowed. It wasn't. I nodded slowly. Well, that's your problem, not mine. She let out a shaky breath. Is this really it? I didn't hesitate. Yeah, it is. She blinked rapidly, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving in. Like she had really convinced herself I'd always be there waiting. But I wasn't. Not anymore. Goodbye, Olivia. She let out a quiet sob, but I didn't stay to hear the rest. I stepped inside, closed the door, and locked it. And I never looked back.